Hello everyone, welcome to the 225 Literary and Jury Charge class. I'm going to read a section from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and this is called Spend a Moment Every Day Thinking of Someone to Thank. I will read this at 200. Okay, ready? This simple strategy, which may take only a few seconds to complete, has long been one of the most important habits I have ever engaged in. I try to remember to start my day thinking of someone to thank. To me, gratitude and inner peace go hand in hand. The more genuinely grateful I feel for the gift of my life, the more peaceful I feel. Gratitude, then, is worthy of a little practice. If you're anything like me, you probably have many people in your life to feel grateful for. Friends, family members, people from your past, teachers, gurus, people from work, someone who gave you a break, as well as countless others. You may want to thank a higher power for the gift of life itself, or for the beauty of nature. As you think of people to be thankful for, remember that it can be anyone, someone who allowed you to merge into traffic, someone who held the door open for you, or a physician or doctor who saved your life. The point is to gear your attention toward gratitude, preferably first thing in the morning. I learned a long time ago that it's easy to allow my mind to slip into various forms of negativity. When I do, the first thing that leaves me is my sense of gratitude. I begin to take the people in my life for granted, and the love that I often feel is replaced with resentment and frustration. What this exercise reminds me to do is to focus on the good in my life. Invariably, as I think of one person to feel grateful for, the image of another person pops into my head, then another and another. Pretty soon I'm thinking of other things to be grateful for: my health, my children, my home, my career, the readers of my books, my freedom, and on it goes. It may seem like an awfully simple suggestion, but it really works. If you wake up in the morning with gratitude on your mind, it's pretty difficult, in fact almost impossible, to feel anything but peace. Okay, I've got some jury charge for you. The subject here is plea for mercy. Here we go, ready? May it please the court, if there is any single attribute of American jurisprudence which makes it above that of any other jurisprudence in the world, it is the ability of the court to maintain an open mind and a dispassionate attitude until it has heard both sides of any given situation. Your Honor, we have here a 22-year-old young man, who has not previously been guilty of any crime of any nature whatsoever, who has never been accused or led before the bar of the court for any crime whatsoever. Your Honor, his mother is in court this morning, also his stepfather and his wife. Had it not been for the space of a few brief moments in the particular evening in question, this boy would not be before the bar of this court charged with the most serious crime on our statute books, the crime of murder. This boy has consistently adopted an attitude of contrition and sorrow and penitence for his act of that night. Witness the following, Your Honor. He gave himself up. He didn't have to be sought out and picked up by the police. He didn't cause the police to search over the community for him. He gave himself up voluntarily to the police officers, and of his own free will and volition gave a statement to the police officers in the presence of Christopher Morrison, without or withholding nothing, telling everything that he knew, completely penitent, completely contrite. Your Honor, much has been said making light of the Prohibition Act, the Volstead Act, if ever there was a justification for that act and its rigid enforcement. That justification is before Your Honor this morning. Here is a young man who is 22 years old. If he hadn't had 15 or 20 shots in him and maybe a dozen beers, this young man would not be before the bar of this court this morning. What this boy did is unforgivable. It is true. The mere physical act of going out and striking someone that he had never seen before. But, Your Honor, this was not a coldly premeditated act. In other words of the statute, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being and requires a cold premeditated act with malice aforethought. Here is the act of a man almost insane. I am making a plea in mitigation, not a plea in defense. At least that is my purpose. We have entered a plea of guilty, but nevertheless, this is the act of a crazy drunken man, young man, who is 22 years old, Your Honor, who actually didn't know what he was doing. He saw someone standing on the corner, and because he was drunk, went up and struck that man. Your Honor, I did not make a plea in defense, and we did not enter a plea of not guilty. I say this as much for the defendant as for his family, because this practitioner at the bar would not like to have it on his conscience that the most serious of all penalties might be possibly inflicted upon this young man. I earnestly ask Your Honor to keep in mind the other facts and the other elements in the case. In brief repetition, the man gave himself up willingly, disclosing all that he knew. All the testimony in this case indicates that this man had consumed a quantity of liquor and that the crime was committed in the heat of drunken rage. Under all the facts of this case, on behalf of this man, this 22-year-old young man, on behalf of his mother and his stepfather and his wife, this man who has his whole life before him, who has never done anything wrong, we throw ourselves upon Your Honor's mercy. Okay, so we're going to stop there. I'm going to read more from The Evolution of Monstrosity from Jerry Brutos, The Fatal Shoe Fetish. We're going to read where we left off. Okay. All right, here we go. I've got like a little gnat in here. Sorry, you guys. You see me swinging my hand around. I think we've had so much rain this year that we're going to get these gnats and mosquitoes and things. Ready? And I'll read this at 200. Susan testified that nothing in Jerry's behavior changed. He continued to be kind and tender with her and bought her presents on holidays and anniversaries. They seemed to have a fairly normal life. Even before they were married, Susan posed nude while Jerry snapped photographs of her. He developed them himself in his own dark room. Often he asked Susan to pose in high-heeled shoes. Jerry asked her to do the housework nude except for her shoes. The first 3 years of their marriage appeared to be happy ones. Jerry, it appeared, had finally found his fantasy girl. Yet there were problems that nagged at the marriage. First, Jerry could not hold down a job. He kept changing jobs, and in their 7-year marriage, the Brutoses lived in 20 different houses. Secondly, Susan felt that Jerry was very distant and removed from their daughter Karen. He avoided all physical contact with his daughter, spent no time with her, and paid her little attention. By the 3rd year of their marriage, Susan was 20 and was beginning to turn away from Jerry's request. Wearing high heels hurt her back, and she was too busy with her child and housework to be dressing up for Jerry. The sex was becoming monotonous, and their daughter was getting too old, Susan felt, for her to be running around the house naked. Once again, Jerry Brutos began to feel rejected. Susan says that Jerry became depressed and withdrawn when she did something to displease him, but she never witnessed him being angry or violent. Unknown to Susan, during these depressions, Jerry went out prowling at night, stealing women's garments. Brutos also began to experience more migraines or migraine headaches, and the pain was more intense. He also claims that he began to have blackouts. People who worked with Jerry Brutos during this period remember a very mild-mannered and brilliant electronics technician. One of his former employers says that he felt that Brutos could have run any television or radio station in the country, but somehow he seemed to lack ambition. He was a dependable and valuable worker and presented himself as a family man who did not smoke or drink and never talked about women. Despite their marital problems, in 1967, Susan became pregnant again. Brutos was very enthusiastic about her second pregnancy and wanted to be in the delivery room with Susan when the baby came. He felt very betrayed by Susan when she told the doctors not to allow him into the delivery room, later explaining to Jerry that she did not want him to see another man seeing her. She did not think it was right. A son, Jason, was born, and Brutos, while continuing to ignore Karen, paid much attention to the infant, taking him along on errands and planning to teach the boy how to use his tools in the basement when he grew up. After Jason's birth, however, the couple drifted apart even further. Susan, although she never told Jerry, was now actually repelled at the idea of having sex with him. She spent a lot of time out with her girlfriends while Jerry was in his basement workshop, fiddling with his electrical and electronic projects. Jerry's mother, whom he openly hated, came over and babysat upstairs. In 1967, another thing happened that may or may not have triggered Jerry Brutos on his path to serial murder. While repairing an electrical device, he touched a live wire and received a tremendous jolt of power that knocked him off of his feet. He was burned and dazed and sustained some neck injuries. Brutos was very fortunate to have inexplicably survived the lethal current. As a result, Brutos would now suffer even more severe headaches and would pass periods of time unable to work. Shortly after the birth of his son and the accident, Jerry Brutos went out on one of his forays in which he knocked women down and stole their shoes. For some reason, however, this time he followed a woman back to her home. He waited until he thought she was asleep and broke into her apartment. When the woman awoke, Brutos pounced on her and strangled her into unconsciousness. He testified that her limp body aroused him. Brutos was now escalating into some kind of necrophiliac fantasy, even though he had not killed the woman. It is hard to say whether Brutos genuinely broke into the woman's apartment to steal her shoes or deliberately stalk her. His change in MO is curious. Why not just knock her down as before and take the shoes? Regardless, Brutos left the apartment with the shoes, which he claimed were his favorite of all he had stolen. A serial killer's first kill is often accidental or unplanned. It gives him the taste of blood, so to speak, and triggers his circular addiction for subsequent murders. We might wonder if there is such a thing as a window for some serial killers during which, if they do not have an opportunity to commit their first murder, they never become serial killers. How many non-lethal sex offenders are separated only by chance from beginning or becoming serial killers? Some would say that it is just a matter of time for individuals destined to be serial killers. They will kill sooner or later. It is inevitable. Others say that some serial killers never start out with murder as part of their fantasy, and that the first homicide happens suddenly and unexpectedly during the first commission of a lesser offense, but then once committed, becomes incorporated into future offenses. The description is akin to human-eating lions and tigers, which, once they overcome their fear of people and get a taste of human flesh, never return to hunt wild game again. We do know by Jerry Brutos' own testimony that by the end of 1967 he was fantasizing about keeping preserved female corpses in a freezer so he could dress them in his favorite shoes and pose them at will. But the actual killing itself was never part of Brutos' pre-homicidal fantasies. One can only wonder what would have happened with Jerry Brutos if on January 20, 1968, encyclopedia saleswoman Linda Slauson had not gotten her addresses mixed up and accidentally called at the Brutos home thinking she had an appointment there. Jerry Brutos confessed to police that he was working in the yard when Slauson appeared at his house saying she had an appointment. He showed her to the rear door and down to the basement, telling her he was interested in buying a set of encyclopedias. Slauson must have been so eager to make a sale that she followed him down to her death. While Brutos' mother was upstairs watching his kids, Slauson sat on a stool in Jerry's basement workshop and began her sales pitch. At some point, Brutos slipped behind her and strangled the young woman to death. He hid her body under the staircase, then went upstairs and asked his mother to go out and get some food. Brutos then returned to the basement and took Slauson's corpse out from under the staircase. The psychological drive behind his murder is clear in the answer he gave police when asked whether he remembered what Slauson was wearing. He responded that he could not remember her clothing, but listed off to the police the precise color and style of her shoes. He said that he tried out different shoes on her from his collection, dressing the dead woman, in his own words, like a big doll. Brutos kept the body into the night. Around 2 a.m., he loaded the corpse into his car and drove to a bridge over a river. He parked his car and took out the jack to make it look like he had a flat tire. Just before he threw her over into the river, he cut her foot off because he wanted to still keep some part of her. Brutos confessed to police that because he was right-handed, he cut off her left foot. He took it home and kept it in his freezer. He would insert the frozen foot into different shoes from his collection and take pictures of it. One suspects that it was no coincidence that Jerry's mother was just a few feet away on the next floor above, upstairs, when he killed his first victim. Here he was under the nose of the woman who had punished him for bringing back a pair of old shoes from the garbage dump when he was just 5 years old, now hacking those shoes off the legs of real women with their feet still inside. It was almost too simple to be true. Okay, we'll stop there. And I know that can be a little disturbing, but again, you have to get used to hearing those types of things because you may decide to work in court or depositions, or, you're going to hear everything out there. So, okay, and that's, actual testimony there from a psychologist. So it's not anything made up. Okay, so I am going to read a selection that's called Reply to Appeal for Probation. Okay, here we go. In this case, your counsel has made a very excellent plea in your behalf. I know you are sincere, just as he was sincere when he presented your matter and in asking for probation. I am also favorably impressed with the attitude of some of the complaining witnesses here and the presentation that the public defender has made. However, this is not the type of case that the court feels comes within the category of a probation case. You are a lawyer and as such, an officer of the court. As an officer of the court, you hold a position of trust and confidence by virtue of licensing by the Supreme Court to practice your profession. You knew the difference between right and wrong, and apparently you did not have the will to follow the dictates of conscience that the law has given you and resist that temptation. There were probably many times over the period of the last 10 or 12 years when you had occasion to reflect on what you were doing, on the trust and responsibilities which you were vested. It is a fact that we do err, and it is a fact that man is tempted to commit offenses against himself and others, but not all of us repeat some of the offenses over so long a period of our lives and to the end of depriving other people of the right to their property. That you sought out your confessor, sought advice from him, and followed that advice to achieve peace with your God is something that all of us would be happy to be able to say. However, confessing your guilt to your God is only one aspect of it, and the court is still left with a duty to perform, a duty that the court is obligated to perform. The court is obligated to do all we can that is fair and just to the people of the state of Illinois, and in justice to the complaining witnesses and to the defendant in this case. The court feels that obligation to society as well as to you. So with respect to the offenses brought forth here, you have presented practically no defense. The court would like to accede to the request of your counsel and put you on probation. It might be that your frank confession and your efforts in cleaning up your offenses is your defense. However, you have an obligation to society as well as to yourself in this case. In indictment number 59-291, the sentence will be the Illinois State Prison for a term of not less than 1 year and not more than 10. In indictment number 59-292, the sentence will be the Illinois State Prison for a term of not less than 1 year and not more than 10, and to run concurrently with case number 291. In indictment number 59-293, the sentence will be the Illinois State Prison for a term not less than 1 year and not more than 10 years, which sentence will run concurrently with cases 291 and 292. In indictment number 59-294, the sentence will be the Illinois State Prison for a term of not less than 1 year and not more than 10 years, which sentence will run concurrently with cases 291, 292, and 293. And in indictment number 59-295, the sentence will be the Illinois State Prison for a term of not less than 1 year and not more than 10 years, which sentence will run concurrently with cases 291, 292, 293, and 294. Now, if the parole board sees evidence of your rehabilitation, you will undoubtedly have such consideration as the case permits. I do hope that they permit you to go out under supervision for a period. However, you will not forget what you said here today about trying to make restitution. That is the sentence of the court. Okay, that concludes our jury charge and literary for the 225 class. Have a great day.